Hi, it's Brandon Splay here from thirstgym.com, back with another training talk video. Today we're talking about the difference between bands and chains and training, why you might pick one over the other, the benefits of each, the cons of each, and overall how they can help your training, whether it be a power lifter, performance athlete, or just somebody that's going to the gym and you're looking to get jacked and strong. So to quickly delineate, we're talking about the bands that go around the barbell. Okay, so yeah, you can do your regular J bands and stuff for baseball. That's great. That definitely has some benefits. I'm really talking about the bands that we're going to use from a strength perspective in the weight room. And then chains, we're talking about the good big 5/8 chains. We're not talking about the dinky little ones that you get at your normal Lowe's or Home Depot or something. We need 5/8 chain. These are big and heavy, and each pair is about 20 to 25 pounds, depending upon the kind that you get and kind of where you get them from. So these were initially popularized by Louis Simmons of Westside Barbell. If you didn't know, he definitely kind of brought bands and chains to the forefront when it comes to the strength and conditioning field. So we got to give our hats off to Louis there. But the main reason behind both of them is they're accommodating resistance and they're going to accommodate the strength curve. So depending upon the exercise you're doing, it's going to just change how the weight feels in certain positions. So if we use a squat, for example, usually the weakest part of your squat is in the bottom. That's where you've got the least amount of leverage to move the load. So that's usually where you're gonna have the most amount of issues. And then as you stand up, obviously you can do more weight. Go into any regular gym and watch people quarter squatting. There's a reason they can quarter squat 315, but they can't full squat all the way down with 315. And that's because of the leverages that they have on the weight. So the thought process and the reason behind the bands and the chains is that as you go down, there's less load on the bar. So when you're in the bottom, your body is perceiving less load. There's less band tension, there's less chain weight. And then what that's gonna do is that's gonna let you be able to come out of the bottom with more weight at top. And so it's gonna accommodate the strength curve. Where you're strongest, you're gonna get more weight. Where you're the weakest, you're gonna get less. And that can be super beneficial from an injury prevention standpoint. So if you're somebody that's banged up and you don't wanna have all that load in those more vulnerable positions, that's awesome. But it's also nice from a strength and conditioning perspective as we can load up the stronger parts of the range of motion, which is ideally going to help us improve performance and get stronger. So the difference between bands and chains, and we'll start with bands first, is that bands have what are called overspeed eccentrics. So bands are elastic, they pull and they recontract back, just like a regular rubber band. That's basically what these are, giant rubber bands. And so when we're at the top, we've got that band stretched, again using my squat as an example, stretched to the maximum. So as we go down, the bands are actually pulling us down faster than we would normally go. And so what happens at the muscular level, the muscles sense this, that they're getting stretched, because as you go down, the muscles are elongating, right? So as they're elongating and the bands provide even a bigger stretch because they're pulling down faster, your muscles are gonna perceive that bigger stretch, and muscles are just act just almost like bands. When they get stretched, they wanna contract back. They don't wanna stay in that good stretched and lengthened position. They wanna be at rest. So when they're overstretched, they're gonna contract faster, and then that's gonna be able to allow us to apply more force into the barbell or be able to lift more weight or lift that weight faster. That's great from a performance perspective because that can help our athletes and our clients or our strength athletes perform exercises faster, and we get a better training adaptation, which makes us stronger. That's awesome. But chains don't have that effect. So the chains are just hanging there. They're not actually pulling down. So we're not going to get those overspeed eccentrics. And so generally bands are a little bit more taxing. They're harder to recover from because when they're pulling, those muscle fibers are basically getting pulled apart faster than what they normally could. And we know that from delayed onset muscle soreness, generally happens more in the eccentric portion of exercises, more so than anything else. So having more eccentric stress, bands are going to cause more stress. The chains are going to do that. So the chains can be seen as a benefit there, is that you're not going to have as much soreness, but you're still going to get the accommodating resistance piece, that the weight's going to get heavier as you go throughout the range of motion. Now, the reason we like the accommodating resistance, especially from a speed and performance perspective, is that if we get the right combination of accommodating resistance, bands and chains, or both, or one or the other, plus the bar weight, we don't have to actually decelerate the bar when we move it fast. And that can be great because then we can train the whole curve explosively and fast, and then that's going to let us develop better athletes or stronger powerlifters or what have you. So there's two ways you can kind of look at this depending upon what you want from the exercises. The chains also have some instability to them. They hang it from the bar, they're shaking, they move around, there's some instability. That can be great if you work with athletes because their environment's chaotic. You never know what's going to happen in sport, so you definitely got to be a little bit more free, where in powerlifting or say any kind of strength sport like that, you probably know what's going on. You know your squats and up and down, and you know you're going to get a squat command. Same thing with bench press and deadlift, but athletes don't have that, so maybe that's not as beneficial for powerlifters. But what I was getting to is that instability component means you can't apply as much force, because if you have instability, you're not going to have as much force transfer. So you have to keep that in mind, where if you're a powerlifter, the instability could actually come into play and be important, because when you unrack that weight, if you're using bands all the time, bands have the bad pitfall of grounding you. They're pulling down the entire time, and so when you're standing with that bar on your back and the bands are pulling, you almost feel like you're in a Smith machine. And so you don't want to do that all the time, because you don't want that when you take the bands off. You don't want to feel like you're all over the place, pitching forward and pitching backward. You want to feel good and confident. So having some chains every now and then can be good, so you don't lose that feeling. But I would argue anyways, you don't want to train with bands and chains year round all the time. You need to phase them in and out of your training, just like anything else, with good methodical reasons of why you're using such implement to begin with, which is kind of why I'm talking about what's the difference between bands and chains to begin with. So the other thing is how to implement them, and how much you should use. So I've already got videos of how to set them up for the squat, bench, and deadlift. You can go find those on my YouTube channel. But what I'm really trying to talk about is how much of the weight should you use. So generally, the rule of thumb is to use between 20 and 25% of the exercise that you're using in bands and or chains. So let's say if you're the 400-pound squatter, you need 20 to 25%. That means you need 80 to 100 pounds of bands and or chain weight at the top. That's what you ideally want to be able to feel. So in the bottom, you're gonna have as close to you can as none or very little. So when you're in the bottom, there's a little bit of band tension, there's a little bit of chain still off the ground, but most of it's either gone or out. So that way when you go to apply up, there's basically, we'll say 10 to 100 pound difference. That's a 90-pound change. That's pretty noticeable when it's on your back or in your hands. And so that's what we're kind of looking for there. Yeah, you could make a case for using less, but then we're talking more about getting into the strength speed rather than the speed strength. I'm kind of talking about speed strength here, but when we look on the velocity curve, basically that just tells you what you're after. If you're after speed strength, you're after about moving things fast and improving your strength to be able to move so fast, and vice versa. If you're doing strength speed, you're more about trying to improve your strength, but you still got to have some speed behind your strength. So hopefully that helps clear that part of it up. But the reason why we need to have that load right is because then, depending upon whether we're doing speed strength or strength speed, depends how much weight we put on the bar, especially from the powerlifting or strength side perspective, where we're trying to improve our athletes and how they kind of move and can perform. So the big take home here is that depending upon what your goals are, will help you determine what you want from the band and or the chain. So most people, if you're somebody that's already fast, bands generally I like to use for people that need to get faster, because they have those overspeed eccentrics, and that's going to teach them how to be faster. They're going to teach them to go down faster and come up faster. Somebody already does that, then I may want to implement more chains because they're already fast. So therefore I might be able to work on instability and having them more confident with those loads, as it might move just a little bit, but it's also more fluid, and I'm going to take that away from them. I'm going to take their strength away and not aid it more, to where the chains aren't going to do that, and then we can work on improving their speed that way. So this can be done, again, I know I use a squat as an example a lot, but you can do this for bench press, you can use this for deadlift, you can even use this for overhead press, incline press. You can use this for a variety of exercises for your athletes or your powerlifters or your strength people, but the general concept is the same. Less weight generally in the bottom or the more vulnerable position of an exercise, more at the top. Usually shoot for 20 to 25% of the accommodating distance load of whatever exercise it is you're doing, whether you're even trying to do this as a strength exercise or speed exercise. That tends to be a good area to cover all your bases, to notice the way it feels, and to be able to adapt towards the strength curve. But then also, again, if you're trying to get faster, then use the bands. Just be careful, because they will make you a little more sore. They will beat you up a little faster than the chains, but the chains also are another good viable benefit, and they do have some instability components and pieces behind them. And if you are somebody that's beat beat up. The chains work well because they help you feel less beat up because you're not getting the overspeed eccentrics. So I know I covered a lot of information, but if you have any specific questions about the difference between bands and chains, why you should pick one, or if you say, hey, I need help with this, definitely please feel free to let me know in the comment section. I'd be happy to help you out and point you in the right direction or answer your question. Thanks. Have a great day.